Directed, written, and produced and edited by Smith, this film cost a staggering $27,575 that was paid for off the back of credit cards. It inspired a whole slew of filmmakers with that get up and go, I can do this attitude. It's made a seminal star out of it's made a star out of the director, Kevin Smith, who is a favorite amongst, well, most geeks. This is, in its truest sense, a cult classic, regarded as one of those pioneering independent films that, along with Richard Linklater's Slacker, set the style for the 1990s. It also launched Smith's View Askew verse. Talk about Marvel having a
connected
talk
universe.
about Marvel having a connected universe. Smith did it first.
Yes, it's a skew-universe of films, which generally the main linking factor was two of the characters from this film that became their own characters throughout all of his properties going forwards. As well as credit cards. I know that he said that he used credit cards to fund it. He also sold off a huge chunk of his comic book collection in order to bankroll this film. And I can feel that kind of pain because I can't think of ever selling my comic books. He has managed to, over the years, now that he's got money, buy back most of the titles that he sold. But wow, that's a dedication in order to get this low budget passion project. This dream that he had.
Excuse me. I think I've got your cough now.
Transmitted it through the microphone.
Yeah, I know.
This dream that he had of like making a film reflecting on the menial life of shop clerks, and anyone who's ever worked in retail or any customer-facing service job will identify with so much of this film. The stupid questions that customers asked being a section of the film that always creases me up because I've encountered that level of stupidity. Even the more ridiculous elements of the film, such as them slacking off to go and play the hockey match on the roof. Yeah, it's kind of taken to the extreme. But I'd be lying if I said that during in McDonald's days, we didn't have quiet nights where we used the source guns as a laser tag kind of thing around the back corridors, shooting each other with Big Mac sauce or mayonnaise. I think I'm that distant from my employment there that they can't take action against me for this anymore. So I think I'm safe. But yeah, we on a quiet night, we'd get bored and we'd slack and we'd just like have fun because that's what you do to stay sane in this kind of retail and consumer environment. And this film taps perfectly into so much of it. And I think that's why it resonates, particularly with an audience of the mindset of myself who's worked in that environment and done the menial work. And, you know, you can relate, you can reflect. I remember the first time that I watched this, I actually watched this after I'd watched Mallrats, because I wasn't aware of Clerks, but Mallrats captured my attention when that came out because of all the comic book aspects and Stan Lee was going to be in it, etc. But after I watched Mallrats, I went back and watched this and I straight away went, wow, this was his first film. This is so well put together.
The film presents a day in the life of two store clerks, Dante Hicks, played by Smith's friends by Brian O'Halloran and Jeff Anderson as Randall Graves, as well as their acquaintance, which includes the two local drug dealers, Silent Bob, Jay and Silent Bob, played by Smith's best friend, Jason Mewes, and Smith himself retrospectively. I remember hearing all the hype about this film before it came to the UK in something pre-internet days where you just read the dailies and you read all the film magazines like Premiere and Empire. And this film felt inspiring. I was just starting out on my journey as wanting to be a filmmaker at that particular point. And I saw this and was inspired. And it literally made me want to do it. Not necessarily make films like Clerks, but inspired me to have have a go at jumping into the industry where, hey, I'm a kid from Sheffield, I can't do this. Smith was a kid from New Jersey who just had the gumption, the nous, and the genuine love to be able to get a movie made. I'd never been as brave as Smith to rely on credit cards, but what I saw in Clerks inspired me several years later to write my first screenplay, which I sold. And I always got to think back to if it wasn't for seeing Clerks and that DIY sense of just go out and tell stories about the world around you and the people you know, I don't think I would have ever put pen to paper in such a way. That and Jon Favreau's Jon Favreau's Swingers were just a huge inspiration to wanting to write, and that kind of recognizable dialogue that again felt like the comedy side of someone like Tarantino, but felt believable, where people on screen were talking about the kind of geek stuff Andy and I talk about all the time. Other people lived in that world, and the classic, working on the Death Star and being a contractor on it. And I always use one of the lines from Clerks 2, which is Lord of the Rings is a film about walking. I do it all the time. I have so much love, not just necessarily for the film, but love for the whole idea of one of us making a film for one of us, if you get my meaning.
Yeah. We had it in our question of the week earlier, characters that you identify with, that you see yourself. I certainly see a lot of myself in Dante Hicks. I too have been on that receiving end of a call early in the morning asking if you can come in and work extra because someone's been sick, and you reluctantly say yes, and then spend the whole day saying, I'm not even supposed to be here today. Why is all this happening? I'm not supposed to be here. I've been that person. And there's a lot of elements of the character. And this is what's so good, is that it's so darned relatable. And it's relatable because Smith himself was working at the very store that they filmed in. He was actually working at the store whilst filming. He's told stories about over the 21 days of shooting. There were some days that he was working from 8 a.m. till 9 p.m. And then as soon as the shutters came down, they were then filming up until 4 a.m. in the morning to get as much of the footage that they could. And then he gets 2 hours of sleep in one of the back rooms before he starts his next morning shift. The guy managed to put his passion into it on barely 2 hours of sleep every night for 21 days because he wanted to make this film. The filming at night is the reason why the shutters were stuck down in the film. He's got the sign on the front saying, I assume we are open. And it's because they could only shoot at night because it was an operating convenience store. They had to set everything up. They had to clean it all up, ready for the next day. So they didn't have a lot of shooting time. So we're working overnight, cover the windows. No one knows it's nighttime. That will work. And it's a great way to do it. I read a story that apparently Miramax picked it up simply on one line from the script. There was an executive, there was a reader who was like reading through the scripts to see whether or not they wanted to get behind it. And he got as far as the line, my girlfriend sucked 37 dicks. What? In a row? And laughed so much. He then ran to the VP of production, showed them that line. They both are in hysterics and realized at that point, this was a voice they wanted to represent. And what a great choice it was for Miramax to pick this up because, that it is a great line. But I love the fact that it is just that one line is what made them go, this is someone we should pay attention to. And Miramax, we've got the more recently known history about Weinstein, etc. But if it hadn't have been for Miramax at that point in time, Kevin Smith might not have got his foot in the door.
Yeah, that's right. They picked up the distribution rights following his run at the Sundance Film Festival. And that's kind of where I'd first heard about it. I had some friends who used to go to Sundance and mentioned this film to me and said, look, you're going to love this. This is so you. And I just waited for the UK release and heard bits and pieces through the trades, through the film magazines before I finally got a chance to see it. And it's a joy. It reminds me of that rebellious nature of 1990s filmmaking. As I said, Slackers, Richard Linklater's film, made on a shoestring budget. Jon Favreau's Swingers, all those movies launching so many careers. It felt like anyone could be a filmmaker. You didn't need years of film school. You just had integrity, talent, and the clout and nous to go out and do it. And I've always admired Smith for doing that. He's always had the ability to basically make the films he wanted. The film turned Kevin Smith into a what's the term? Something celebre. It's a French term. When somebody's Asian, de celebre. I'll go with it. Turned him into a bankable, if not star, then talent. He was picked up to write Tim Burton's almost legendary Superman Lives. He wrote a script for The $6 Million Man. I've always actually preferred his writing to his directing. His directing is so minimal that there's no particular style to it. It's almost theatre. But I love Kevin Smith's writing. He always adds something in that I recognise, even if I've not been keen on his film. My favourite film, with Clerks a second, is Chasing Amy, which I think is so brutally honest and talking about seeing yourself. I again, one of those films where I saw myself in again was Chasing Amy. Adore it. I think it's his strongest, most mature work.
Yeah, Smith's own films, like you say, he's not the strongest of directors. I think his lack of talent of directing kind of benefits Clerks in a way, because it feels like you are a fly on the wall within that store, just watching these events play out. It doesn't need flashy gimmicks. It doesn't need stylized lensing. It's just a simple set up a camera and two people talking about Death Star being blown up and all the innocent lives that were lost who were just like manual laborers trying to fix that trying to build that Death Star. Those kind of conversations that we as geeks have on random days. The black and white aesthetic choice was deliberate because it helps them avoid post-production touching up that colors would need, because a convenience store has so many different colors on the shelves. It would have been a nightmare if something didn't come across well. So keeping it as kind of like a grainy black and white, again, it makes it feel intimate and personal.
Yeah, there's an immediacy, isn't there? You almost said like a documentary-esque approach to it.
Yeah. There was original ending to this, which would have had Dante dying at the end when he's left alone in the store, ready to lock up, and someone comes in to rob them. And then it would have resulted with, while he's lying on the floor dying, someone else comes in and steals some cigarettes, because that's how Smith thought that like it would be like an ironic play on like his whole not supposed to be here today. And the whole film was based loosely on the Divine Comedy. There's 9 breaks in the movie that denote the 9 rings of hell, and it's supposed to be his journey through his own hell of a day. But the original ending was never going to fly. It seemed a bit too dark, a bit too, wow. Audience is going to walk out of this feeling really, really let down. And so it was changed. There was also the removal of one of the scenes that was never shot, which was in the script, which was the wake that they go to, which on the Clerks X DVD, there was an animated version of that scene, so you could get to see how that plays out. It was amusing, but it was unnecessary, and it was a great taking out. And it showed that even in those early days, Smith kind of had a handle on, I've got all these ideas, I'd like them all. Actually, that probably won't work, and would play with things to, deliver what is. Clerks is just a great rewatchable film about life. It's just people talking nonsense about life and the kind of characters that you interact with on a daily basis who are just so bizarre. Everyone in this film I can identify with the people around me.
Yeah.
No matter how bizarre and how weird some of the situations are, they're all kind of real to me because I've encountered things just as bizarre, just as crazy, and conversations that have been just as over the top and dirty.
The film was a success. It spawned, I'm going to say, 2 TV offshoots. One was a pilot for a live action TV series, which featured none of the original cast. In fact, Silent Bob didn't appear because Smith owned the characters and had no part to play in the TV show. Apparently, it was terrible. There was the Clerks animated series, which was interesting.
It was all right, that.
It's not bad. I remember it playing on Channel 4 back in the day. It was clever. There was only 6 episodes that were released, but I think you can find them on a home release.
Yeah.
The Clerk stories continued in comic form. The Lost Scene, for instance, appears as a comic adaptation. And then we had the 2 sequels, but none of them have the rawness and the edge that the original Clerks had. It was about a time and a place in the director's life that where energy, that need to put something down on film really, really shines through.
Yeah.
It's not my favorite. I've got a lot of love for Mallrats, and I've got so much love for Chasing Amy. Dogma as well is an interesting, if not entirely successful film. But I've always liked Kevin Smith. I'd like Kevin Smith to be my mate because I think we would talk forever about the stuff that we like. I listen to his podcast. I think he is sort of our geek leader to some extent. And if you haven't seen Clerks, give yourself the joy of watching it. It's raw, it's filthy, it's funny. It's about a time and a place when filmmakers, especially in this day and age when we've got so many different ways of releasing content, were doing something that came honestly from the heart.
Yeah, every one of the Askew Universe films are kind of a sequel to this because there's so many interlinking characters and mentions and stories, particularly Jay and Silent Bob, be it Chasing Amy, Mallrats, Dogma, the Jay and Silent Bob Strikes Back, or Jay and Silent Bob reboot. But the actual 2 sequels to Clerks, they don't quite nail it. Clerks 2 starts off well, and it's looking at a point in the life when you're in your 30s and you're reflecting on where you are and you've got married and should you be married. It just, that final act becomes a bit unnecessarily crass.
Yeah, and I totally agree. It's half a good film for me.
And Clerks 3, I think it's a better sequel than what Clerks 2 was, but it relies on nostalgia more than anything else. It's got a great little backstory that, Randall suffers a heart attack. So it's Kevin Smith drawing on his life again because he had his health scare and his heart attack. And that's what led to him having Randall have the heart attack in this. And Randall reflects on what he's actually done that will benefit the world and decides that he wants to make a film on his experiences working within the quick stop groceries. And it basically becomes like an origin story of Clerks, but it then relies on just going, oh, remember this bit from Clerks, remember this bit from Clerks, and doesn't quite become its own film. It does have a great closure and an emotional impact in the final act that just about salvages it and makes it worthwhile. But neither of the sequels have been anywhere near this very first raw and immensely engageable film of characters who generally aren't really likable characters, but by the end of it, you come to love them.
Yep, I totally agree with everything you said there. I think wherever there's a Kevin Smith film in the world, that's all that matters. You've not got to always like it, and more often than not, I've not loved them, but I always find something in it that I like. He does have a very, very unique voice, and it all comes down to his origin story, where he was bitten by a radioactive piece of film and made Clerks. Directed by Bob Clark, one of those directors who would basically direct every kind of genre at some point through his career. The film stars Melinda Dillon, Darren McGavin, and Peter Billingsley as Ralphie Parker, a 9-year-old boy in 1940. And as that magical time, that build up to Christmas comes, Ralphie wants one thing for Christmas: a Red Ryder carbine action 200 shot range model air rifle. Ralphie's desires are basically stifled by his mother, who basically says to him, "You'll shoot your eye out." This film is a series of vignettes narrated by the adult Ralphie that leads through to Christmas morning. And why do I love this film? Because I was Ralphie. In fact, we've all been Ralphie at some part of our lives, around that magical time when you would turn up at your favorite department store to look in the window at the new arrivals of all the stuff that you would want for Christmas. Ralphie's not the smartest kid, neither is the dumbest. He's kind of an average kid, but he's so damn likable. And I see myself, when we talked about this the other week, where do you see yourself? I see myself as Ralphie. I used to go to, and if you're from Sheffield, you may remember this, a huge toy store called Redgate. In that build up to Christmas, it was just magical, where you would start to put your Christmas list together and count down the days, hoping that Father Christmas would bring you that particular gift. I've been going on about this film for ages, and now I've passed it on to Andy. Andy, did it bring out all the Christmas nostalgia? Andy, did it bring out any Christmas nostalgia for you, or was it just a turkey?
It's neither. I mean, I've said on previous years when we've done our festive things that I'm not a very festive person when it comes to films, because I find that too many festive films are overly schmaltzy, and hence I end up giving away festive films to the losing teams at the quizzes every November when we do our last one of the year, as a joke, because I don't particularly like films like Elf. I don't like Love Actually. I don't like Home Alone. And I've been averse to this over the years.
Out of those three, I'll agree with two of those.
Yeah. Over the years, I've been aware of this film, but I've always avoided it because the clips that I've seen have made my teeth start to chatter in slight ire and frustration, thinking it's just going to be schmaltz. Now, I didn't enjoy it. I'll say that off the bat. It's not going to be one that I'm going to go back to revisit anytime soon. But I didn't not enjoy it at the same time. I found moments that I was chuckling. I found moments that were warm, that captured, I can see the nostalgia factor, the memories of when you were a child, and it taps nicely into it. I just feel that it kind of benefits, but also suffers from the vignette approach, because it benefits when there's one little vignette that made me chuckle and worked, but then it suffers because there'll be another one that follows that you just go, did we need this? Did we need a lamp which was like a sexy leg? Yeah, there's elements that didn't work for me, but it felt like sketches. And when one sketch fails, another one picks it up. So I didn't not enjoy it. I just didn't enjoy it enough to mark it down as a Christmas favourite. And a lot of the little vignettes pretty much didn't really have to be set at Christmas. And they're the ones that worked, the ones that didn't need to be set at Christmas. The ongoing theme of him wanting to get that Christmas present is the Christmas link. It's that whole build up to Christmas and the chaos that ensues around the family, which I feel has been done better in other comedy films that came later, one of which we're going to do as a deep dive, I think, next week. But with this, it didn't touch me in the way that it touches other people. It was there. I kind of enjoyed it, semi-enjoyed it, and then was glad when it finished and just wrapped it up. I do need to say that the running joke of "you shoot your eye out," that's one of the bits that made me laugh ridiculously, particularly when it gets to the Santa saying it while he's clutching onto the slide to stop himself going. And that's when it shows the strength of this film, because Billingsley, his reaction and his facial expression on that scene was perfect. And that's part of the elements that works for the film. It's just the rest of the film didn't capture my heart.
I'd never heard of this film until I say it was recommended to me, and then I watched it, and I found it to be just wonderfully nostalgic. It also's got a darker edge to it, and it's always humorous. It has become a perennial favorite in our house, and I think it's that darker edge. It's not a schmaltzy Christmas story. This is the tribulations that a kid will go through, and especially in that build up to Christmas. There's the bully, again, something I recognized. Or when you fight back, when there's a bully around you, I kind of recognize that as well. I just grew to see myself in Ralphie. I was that kid. We used to go out as a family, pick the Christmas tree. As a family, we'd go late night Christmas shopping when the shops were open and the lights were on and the Christmas parades were on. This is one of those which feels personal, and I find it a delight. I find it truly funny. I've now shared it with the family who love it as well, and it just gets me every time. I'll probably take a break from it this year. I can't say that I need to watch it every year, but when I do come back to it, it takes me back to a time and a place, and I love it. I'm going to talk about the sequel from there. If you're going to jump in.
Well, I'll just jump in first to say, I mean, it's an interesting film to look at when you consider other Bob Clark works, because before this, he'd basically been known primarily for horrors and thrillers, right up until literally before this, when he gave us Porky's and Porky's 2, which couldn't be as far removed from the warmth of A Christmas Story than anything ever could be. I mean, the Porky's films are ones that I've considered for the deep dives at some point, but then I realised they're not going to stand the test of time at all.
Yeah.
That memory that I have of them when I was in my teens and they seemed like saucy, ribald comedies, it's not going to age well. So I don't want to go back to them. But it's interesting to see that, this film inspired shows like The Wonder Years. And again, The Wonder Years, loads of people have love for, but I could never connect with. And
Right.
This is why I don't think I connect with A Christmas Story. Like I say, I can appreciate elements of it and the moments that amuse me, but I don't feel connected, even though the themes, like you've described, I can relate to the bullying. I can relate to, that desire for getting that right Christmas presents. I can relate to the things that are shown on screen. It just all felt a bit twee at times. But when it worked, it really worked. And when it worked, it was primarily down to Billingsley being such a great young actor.
Yeah, just sticking with Bob Clark, you're right. He had a very, very odd career. I mean, he's a Canadian director, responsible for, as you said, horror, Black Christmas, which got remade a couple of years ago. You mentioned Porky's. He did one of the best Sherlock Holmes movies with Christopher Plummer as Holmes in Murder by Decree, which is just a fantastic Holmes movie and one of my absolute favorites. But back to A Christmas Story, as I said, it's much loved exactly for those reasons, that it does make me nostalgic in many ways, and I do recognize myself in Ralphie. And you're right, Billingsley's wide-eyed. He's got a beautiful face that just emotes every scene. He's just perfect. There was a sequel, and there was a lot of trepidation before watching it because, legacy sequels do have a tendency to be a little bit poor. But I gave it a go, and while it doesn't have the charisma, it does have the love for those characters in a way that I didn't expect. So it's set as Ralphie's now an adult. He's a struggling writer, and he goes back home for Christmas after the passing of his father. So the film is dedicated to Darren McGavin. And after enough time, it does work. It's never going to be a classic, but neither is it a blight on the original as some sequels can be. So A Christmas Story, will always be the perfect present for me. But for you, Andy, I think it's going to stay under the tree.
It might get repackaged and re-gifted to someone else at a later date, but at this point in time, it's gathering dust.